This episode of Shield Hero features lolicon furries and a giant dinosaur which crushes people. It doesn't get any more anime than that. Lower your shields and grab your tissues. It's going to be an emotional episode of the rising of the Shield Hero. And yes, this episode features lolicon furries. I'm not talking about those type of tissues, you freaking perverts. I had a feeling that the way the last episode ended and the fact that this episode is called Raphtalia, that we were probably going to go into her backstory, and lo and behold, that's what this entire episode was all about. Basically, we've been waiting an entire week to see if Raphtalia is going to end up shish kebabbing Rabier, and it doesn't really end up happening. Now, Fumi is actually managing to talk her down during this very intense scene, where he says that she's gained a lot of strength ever since she met him, and she learned to be stronger in more ways, not just using a sword. This is when suddenly Rabier decides to get all frickin' swashbuckling gun-ho, brings out his sword, and like a frickin' idiot ends up tripping and falling out the window and dying. It was kind of anticlimactic, I have to say, but again, it actually ends up saving the character of Raphtalia. There was no way that she was going to follow through with this. It would completely destroy her character. And seeing that fat bastard fall out the window seemed like the perfect segue into her backstory. And her backstory shows a number of really important details. First, we do get a quick rundown of seeing what her life was like in the village, living with her friends, in particular her friends Rifana and Keel. And everything was a pretty happy furry paradise. That is, of course, until the wave of destruction arrived and it ended up killing her parents and destroying most of their village. Raphtalia, on the other hand, actually took it upon herself to sort of pep up everybody's spirit by putting on a big old smile, something that was imparted to her from her father. Even in the darkest of times, put on a big smile and don't show any fear. And this actually ended up really just helping a lot of the citizens of this town. Things seemed like they were going to be all hunky-dory. That is until all of the douchebag soldiers from the King of Melromark came in and decided to take a lot of these children away and enslave them. And that's when they decided to bring them to Rabier so that he could personally torture all of them because, I don't know, he's just a sick fuck. The entire torture scene is not really overly violent and they don't show all that much, but it still manages to be pretty disturbing, especially with the fact that Raphtalia will not falter. She doesn't cry, she doesn't yell, she continues to have a smile on her face the entire time, much to the anger of Rabier, and he turns his anger towards her friends, in particular Rifana, who seems to take a lot of beatings. Raphtalia promises that one day they will be able to return home, and she even makes this little flag for her, which is a representation of their home and where they're actually going to return to. Until eventually we see that Raphtalia is taken in by that slave trader, and that's where we were at the beginning of the series. Later on in the episode, you get to see that her, Naofumi, Melty, and Philo go down into the inner catacombs and dungeons to see if there are any survivors, in particular Rifana. And they do end up finding some of her friends, some of the orphans, in particular Keel, the dog girl. Eventually, however, Raphtalia does end up finding her friend Rifana. And the good news is, she lost a lot of weight. Unfortunately, no, her friend is dead and she passed away, and Raphtalia continues to beat herself up about this, knowing that if she only had strength when she was younger, she could have potentially saved her friend, and that there's no more room for smiles. That is until Naofumi reminds her that if it wasn't for Raphtalia, he would not be able to trust anyone in this world, and he would be just sort of stuck and mired in his very own darkness. This manages to bring her back to life a little bit as she brings on another smile, and they say that they're actually going to bury the remains of Rifana. As they make their way to the top, suddenly we get to see that Rabier is somehow still alive, and he's praying at this massive obelisk tower, and apparently this tower is some sort of sealing device for an ancient creature, and he's just going to unleash it on everyone in a last-ditch effort to sort of kill everyone and save face. The thing is, what ends up coming out of the ground might be one of the most doofiest-looking CG dinosaurs that I have ever seen. It's essentially a dinosaur covered with armor, and hilariously, it just ends up crushing Rabier into all sorts of goo. This scene might be one of the funniest scenes of the entire series inadvertently. I mean, the only thing I can compare it to would maybe be Philo kicking Motoyasu in the balls, but still, I can't wait to see what they're actually going to do against this giant dinosaur creature. If anything, it'll give us a pretty cool action scene to look at, or it could end up looking kind of bad. I don't know. I mean, the CG dragon earlier in the series wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but something about this dinosaur just rubbed me the wrong way. It seems like it didn't even belong in this series at all. But I'm willing to hold my reservations until the next episode. So what's the rundown on this episode of The Rising of the Shield Hero? A pretty standard episode, which honestly didn't really break ground too much. The entire backstory of Raphtalia wasn't the most exciting thing to sing in the world, but at least we finally got to see what the entire deal was with how she actually got to be a slave from the slave trader. And it's tied into the fact that there's all these other Demi Human characters which look like they might end up being sort of a mainstay of the series. In particular, the character of Keel the dog girl. I don't know if she's going to end up being like sort of a new companion for Naofumi and his party, or if she's just going to go back with the other Demi Humans who are eventually going to build up their strength yet again to fight alongside the Shield Hero. I don't know what's going to happen. All I know is it's great to finally see another new character who is a Demi Human. We didn't get to learn too much about their overall culture. For the most part, they're basically just normal humans, aside from the fact that they have tails and ears. That's just about it, which leads me to believe, like, why do people hate them so much? There's really nothing all that crazy or outlandish about them at all. For the most part, they just look like your typical cosplayers. Really, it's just another one of those politics things in this world that you really shouldn't think about too much and just sort of accept at face value. The episode did a pretty good job, again, too, of reaffirming that while Raphtalia could very well go to the dark side of the Force, Naofumi has influenced her quite a bit and vice versa. So there's still a lot of goodness in her character, and that's what just makes her such a wholesome character for the series and one of my personal favorites. The moment of her finding Rifana was also very disturbing, as throughout most of the episode we got to know her character, not in the deepest of senses, but to know that Raphtalia had a very close friend and someone that she could have potentially considered family, and ultimately feeling that she let her down, even though her actions coming to this place with Naofumi ended up doing really good by freeing all of these people. There had to be a major sacrifice, and unfortunately that was Rifana. There is a moment where she is reunited with her in some sort of weird heavenscape type of thing, which is mostly one of those scenes that's up for interpretation. Does it happen? Does it not really happen? I don't know. It's kind of strange. But it does manage to put a nice little bow on this episode. That is until the giant fucking dinosaur explodes out of the ground. Can't wait to see how that's going to go down, but what I will say is this was a pretty solid episode of the series. It did feel a little long-winded at times, and like I said, there really wasn't anything that was that surprising about it, but at least it's eye-opening material, and it still had some pretty good insight on Raphtalia and her backstory, which is why ultimately I'm going to give this episode 4 CGI dinosaurs out of 5. You heard my thoughts on the episode. I'd like to hear yours. Tell me all of them in the comment section below. Your thoughts on Raphtalia's backstory, what you think about the new characters of Rifana and Keel, and what you hope to see in the battle against the giant doofy-looking dinosaur. I want to hear all your thoughts in the comment section. So thank you guys for watching this review. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down, baby.